Today we celebrate the life of the Queen of England, Her Royal Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II on Mission Park Cares.
And we remember that the Queen was a real friend of Texas.
She once remarked in public that no state commands such fierce pride and loyalty. Lesser mortals are pitted for their misfortune in not being from Texas.
Now, here's a look at the Queen's historic visit in Texas, right here in San Antonio.
In 1991, Queen Elizabeth became the first British monarch to visit Texas, arriving in style aboard a legendary British Airways Concorde jet. After landing at Bergstrom Air Force Base in Austin, the Queen made her way to the Alamo City, where she was fascinated to learn about the history of the famous defenders at the Alamo. From there, she toured the famous Riverwalk and the Arneson River Theater, accompanied by our very own female mayor at the time, Lila Cockrell. She also paid a royal visit to see the many famous exhibits at the Institute of Texan Cultures. In all, she spent 2.5 days getting to know the people and visiting the famous landmarks in Texas. 2 years later at Buckingham Palace, she invites a famous Texan to receive the rarest of honors for a foreign citizen, knighthood from the British Crown. That Texan was none other than President George H.W. Bush. When President Bush passed away 25 years later, the Queen said, quote, "Prince Philip and I remember our days in Texas in 1991 with great fondness. My thoughts and prayers are with his family and the American people."
To the royal family and all of England, we pass on our condolences from Mission Park and from all our community right here in San Antonio.
May flights of angels sing her to her rest.
She was Britain's longest reigning monarch, the one constant in a country that changed so much in many decades. From the post-war era of food rations to the digital age, the Queen moved with the times, and the people moved with her. Through crisis, public support and affection towards her rarely wavered. A monarch admired for her longevity and sense of duty. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor was born at the home of her mother's parents. At the time, her grandfather, King George V, was on the throne. Her father, the Duke of York, was the second son of King George and Queen Mary. When her grandfather died, her uncle Edward became king, but his reign would only last just 10 months. He abdicated to marry an American divorcee.
His irrevocable determination to renounce the throne.
In a year that saw 3 kings, Elizabeth's father assumed the throne, and the day that she would become queen was no longer in doubt. She met her future husband 2 years earlier, in 1934, when they attended the wedding of Prince Philip's cousin and the uncle of Princess Elizabeth. By the end of the decade, war had broken out, and Philip was sent to sea. Elizabeth spent those years in the Auxiliary Territorial Service.
Princess, who was on the eve of her 19th birthday when these pictures were taken, is at the wheel of a 1,500-weight truck in convoy.
A monarch of the future, but now a mechanic and not afraid to get her hands dirty.
Today is Victory in Europe Day.
When the war ended, she chose to leave the palace and celebrate with the crowds on the streets of London. 2 years later, Princess Elizabeth married Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark. It was a wedding to lift the country's spirits. In 1949, Charles became their first of 4 children, soon followed by Anne. For a few years, the family enjoyed time out of the public spotlight. Then came the news with the Queen's father, King George VI, passing away at the age of 56. Elizabeth and Philip were in Kenya, just beginning a 5-month tour of the Commonwealth. At 25 years old, Princess Elizabeth was now head of state. The coronation took place a year later, in 1953, an event the Duke of Edinburgh insists should be televised for the world to see. In the 60s, Queen Elizabeth had 2 more boys, Andrew and Edward. The Queen is said to have worried about her children like any mother, and on her silver wedding anniversary in 1972, she spoke lovingly about what her family meant to her.
Now that that we have reached this milestone in our lives, we can see how immensely lucky we have been, or perhaps fortunate might be a better word. We had the good fortune to grow up in happy and united families.
Outside family life, the Queen had many interests, perhaps most famously horses. She loved riding them and watching them. She was a regular at the Derby at Epsom and Ascot, where her horses won on several occasions. She had a love of the outdoors and determination to protect the natural world. She launched the Queen's Commonwealth Canopy, a conservation project with the mission of creating a network of forests in each of the 53 countries of the Commonwealth. Her dedication to the Commonwealth and her beloved home country never wavered, serving more than 600 charities as royal patron or president. Even after the Duke retired from public life, the Queen continued to fulfill royal engagements. A life of public service that saw her post more than 100 state visits. In the new millennium, she kept busy not just by others, but by her own milestones. A golden jubilee. A diamond jubilee. In 2015, she became the longest reigning monarch and celebrated her 90th birthday the following year. And this summer, at the age of 96, a weekend of celebrations marked her platinum jubilee.
Her Majesty's impact has been felt worldwide.
And many worldwide dignitaries have shared their stories in relationship to the Queen.
I know that today there are countless people in this country and around the world who have experienced the same sudden access of unexpected emotion. And I think millions of us are trying to understand why we are feeling this deep and personal and almost familial sense of loss. Perhaps it's partly that she's always been there, a changeless human reference point in British life, the person who, all the surveys say, appears most often in our dreams, so unvarying in her pole star radiance that we have perhaps been lulled into thinking that she might be in some way eternal. But I think our shock is keener today because we are coming to understand in her death the full magnitude of what she did for us all. And think of what we asked that 25-year-old woman all those years ago. To be the person so globally trusted that her image should be on every unit of our currency, every postage stamp, the person in whose name all justice is dispensed in this country, every law passed, to whom every minister of the Crown swears allegiance, and for whom every member of our armed services is pledged, if necessary, to lay down their lives. Only she could be trusted to be above any party political or commercial interest, and to incarnate impartially the very concept and essence of the nation.
She was one of my favorite people in the world, and I will miss her so. She served us all with strength and wisdom for 70 years as we grew into the diverse, optimistic, responsible, ambitious, and extraordinary country we are today. She was thoughtful, wise, curious, helpful, funny, and so much more. In a complicated world, her steady grace and resolve brought comfort and strength to us all.
I remember one picnic at Balmoral which was taking place in one of the bothes on the estate. The hampers came from the castle and we all mucked in to put the food and drink out on the table. I picked up some cheese, put it on a plate and was transferring it to the table. The cheese fell on the floor. I had a split-second decision to make. up the cheese, put it on the plate, and put it on the table. And I turned round to see that my every move had been watched very carefully by Her Majesty the Queen. I looked at her, she looked at me, and she just smiled.
She was an inspiring presence to be around, and I've been around her, and she was fantastic. And she led the country through some of our greatest and darkest moments with grace, decency, and a genuine caring warmth. I'm 75, she's been with me all my life, and I feel very sad that she won't be with me anymore. But I'm glad she's at peace, and I'm glad she's at rest, and she deserves it. She's worked bloody hard. I send my love to her family and her loved ones, and she will be missed, but her spirit lives on, and we celebrate her life tonight with music, okay?
The Queen's legacy will last forever. Here's a music tribute to the Queen and to her family.
The Queen's 10-day mourning period ends tomorrow with a funeral to follow at Westminster Abbey.
And since her passing, thousands of people have been able to pay their respects and give their condolences to the family as she lies in state.
Here's a look at how a nation has remembered their queen.
I am deeply grateful for the addresses of condolence by the House of Lords and the House of Commons, which so touchingly encompass what our late sovereign, my beloved mother, the Queen, meant to us all. As Shakespeare says of the earlier Queen Elizabeth, she was a pattern to all princes living. As I stand before you today, I cannot help but feel the weight of history which surrounds us and which reminds us of the vital parliamentary traditions to which members of both houses dedicate yourselves with such personal commitment for the betterment of us all. My lords and members of the House of Commons, we gather today in remembrance of the remarkable span of the Queen's dedicated service to her nations and peoples. While very young, her late Majesty pledged herself to serve her country and her people, and to maintain the precious principles of constitutional government which lie at the heart of our nation. This vow she kept with unsurpassed devotion. She set an example of selfless duty, which, with God's help and your counsels, I am resolved faithfully to follow.
Thank you for joining us today for Queen Elizabeth II's tribute.
And as we all have seen over the last few weeks, how important it is for all of us to get together and to be able to mourn and to grieve and to honor a life well lived like Queen Elizabeth II. We will miss her.
Absolutely. Her legacy will live on forever and ever in our hearts.
We love you and we'll always be here for you.
And at Mission Park, it's our mission to care.